Hello and welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation. With me, your host Owen James. Guys, we're going to talk what's next. The season. What a horrible season. It is finally done, dusted and finished. I've got to say, I'm glad to see the back of it. It's been an absolutely miserable season for Rangers. I mean, there have been some positives, some high points. I mean, look, if we're trying to pick anything positive out of this season, I suppose what we picked Nicolas Rascan as one of the big positives from this season. Yet some fans are still slagging him off, which I really genuinely don't get. Probably the same ones that think Cyril Dessers is a good player. I mean, obviously beating Celtic twice this season, once under Philippe Clement and once under Barry Ferguson. I think some people did forget that it was Clement that was in charge when we beat them 3-0 at Ibrox. Progressing to, in the Europa League. I mean, that was a very big positive. Progressing to the quarterfinals of the Europa League was a huge positive. I mean, people talk about the Bilbao game, and look, there's no point. I mean, yes, okay, dodgy decision, yes, VAR didn't work, etc., etc. But as I've said on multiple occasions, it's not VAR that didn't work. It was the people behind the computer screen. VAR in itself is a perfect system that does not have any flaws. It's the morons behind the cameras, the morons that watch the videos, the morons that watch the computers that are the issue, as we saw this weekend in the FA Cup final, where, well, look, as much as I dislike Manchester City, and believe me, I really do dislike Manchester City, but they were cheated out of the FA Cup. The Crystal Palace goalkeeper should have been sent off. He clearly handled the ball outside the area, which, as we all know, is a sending off offence. However, VAR failed to intervene. Why? Because the Muppets behind the screen, again, didn't do their job correctly. I don't really want to get hung up on talking about VAR for ages. It's not a VAR. We could, certainly talk about VAR at some point. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with VAR. I think VAR, the system, is brilliant. It's an absolutely superb system. It's the idiots behind the computer screens that make all the mistakes. And look, I think if you allowed computers, AI, to make the decisions, you wouldn't have any problems and you wouldn't have any wrong decisions. You'd have 100% correct decisions. It's humans that make the mistakes. You know what? When robots learn to run, we're in trouble. Anyway, look, let's move on. What next for Rangers? Maybe we get a robot as manager. That could be a positive, couldn't it? Anyway, look, what next? What next for Rangers? I mean, look, it was announced today, obviously, that Barry Ferguson has left the club. He is no longer the Rangers manager. So I guess the hopes of all of those Barry fans out there who wanted Barry to be the new manager, well, I'm sorry, your hopes just ended. Barry Bassett will not become the new manager. Look, all joking aside, he answered the call. He came in. He saw the team through ready till the end of the season. He had some good moments, beating Celtic at Parkhead, beating Fenerbahce in Turkey. He had some dreadful moments. His win percentage was pretty shit. His team put in some pretty shit performances. We've kind of just, I don't know, it was a really mixed bag, wasn't it? Look, I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not having this pish that's, I'm not allowed to use that word anymore. This rubbish, that's spouted often by people that, he did the best with the crap that he had. Yes, the players are, largely to blame for this season. I'm not going to take away from that. The players do carry about 50% of the blame, whereas the manager carries the other 50%. And if we're going to go beyond that, the board carry about 20%. How you get 120%, I don't know. But there we go. But, the players do carry some of the blame, but I'm going to stick to what I've said all season. There are some good players in that squad. Genuinely, there are some good players in that squad, and you can talk all you want and say no, they're rubbish. Well, I beg to differ. Rid van Yilmaz is not a dreadful player. I mean, you wouldn't be getting Turkish clubs bidding between £4 and £6 million for him when he's likely to leave the club this summer and likely to go back to Turkey for somewhere in the region of £4 to £6 million. Again, you're not going to pay that for a shit player. John Suter is one of the best centre-backs in Scotland. Yes, he makes his mistakes, but then again, like I've said to you on multiple occasions, if he didn't make those mistakes, then he wouldn't be playing for Rangers. He would be playing in the top six in England. Dujon Sterling, when he's fit, that's the big issue with him. When he's fit, is a very, very good player. Nicolas Rascan is one of the best players, I think, in Europe at the moment. He is an absolute quality player, hence why he's attracting interest from English clubs. Mo Diamonde in Europe has been excellent at times. Yes, he has let the game pass him by at times in Scotland, but I think that's more how he's been used and how he's been sort of deployed by the manager, whether that be Clement or whether that be Barry. I think Václav Černý is a top player, a really good player. Hamza Igerman is a very good player when he's played in his normal position, when he's not stuck out on the wing just to crowbar that man into the squad. Look, I think, there are some decent players in this squad, and I think a good coach, and I'll stick by this every single day for the rest of my life, a good coach could have got more out of that squad. I'm not saying they would have won the league, because I don't think they would have done, but because there was a lot of rubbish surrounding him, and that was the big issue. Whilst you had some very good footballers, you had some absolute rubbish players last season who let the club down on a frequent basis. The James Taverniers of this world, the not Leon Balogun, he's one of the better players, sorry. Robin Proper, Jeff Day, and his defending was shocking. Bayrami was poor. Cortez was always injured. Tom Lawrence was a bit of a waste of space. There was a lot of players out there that kind of let the club down. But look, overall, you've got to look at it in terms of, I think, a proper coach, someone who can actually coach a football team, probably would have got a little bit more out of them. Certainly more out of them than Barry got, and certainly more out of them than Philippe Clement got. I think a lot of it was down to very poor coaching, and that's got to be put on the manager. And that's why managers lose their jobs at the end of the day, not why players do. Look, I think, like whatever we say, he came in, he held the club together until the end of the season. He did a average job. I think, taking your blue tinted spectacles off and looking at it in terms of the job that he did as a manager, he did a very average job. And I know I'm going to get absolutely slaughtered for this, but I'm going to ask you this question. If Barry Ferguson had never played for Rangers and was never not a Rangers fan and was not a Rangers man, would you still be giving him the plaudits that he's getting at times from some of our fans? If he'd played for Aberdeen, or he played for Dundee United throughout his career, or he played for Blackburn Rovers for his entire career, or Birmingham City for his entire career, would he get cut the slack that he is by some fans? No, I don't think he is. Yes, he is a Rangers legend. Yes, as a footballer, he is outstanding. Yes, as a Rangers player, he is a legend, and I love him to bits for his time as a player at this club. Patrick Stewart, yes, Patrick Stewart's that man who looks like a cross between Elmer Fudd and Paul Zerdin's baby puppet, although I think the ventriloquist puppet that Paul Zerdin has speaks a lot more sense than Patrick Stewart on a regular basis. I think Elmer Fudd speaks a lot more sense. I tore a manager. Patrick Stewart said this: the club and I'm sure our supporters will be forever grateful to Barry for stepping up and taking on the role of head coach. He and his staff have performed admirably amongst some trying circumstances and achieved some excellent results along the way. My God, I actually agree with Patrick Stewart on something. Barry, Neil, Billy and Alan have all had distinguished playing careers with Rangers, and they have all enhanced their standing with the club for their work since February. The reception they received at Ibrox on Wednesday night was fully merited, and I know meant so much to Barry and his team. The search for our new head coach is progressing well, and we look forward to concluding our process in the coming period. I'll pick up on that last paragraph in a moment. Barry Ferguson said this. He said, I've always lived the dream as a player and as a captain of Rangers, and to do so as a head coach these last 3 months has been an enormous honour to me. There have been some ups and downs, but I have loved the experience and given my all throughout. I want to thank Neil, Billy and Alan, 3 staff members who came in with me, and all of the staff who have supported me during my time in charge. Indeed, from everyone looking at the training centre and at Ibrox, the backing I have received has been phenomenal. Above all, I want to thank our supporters. There are no doubt this has been a difficult season, but the backing of the team and I have continued to receive in spite has been incredible. I have said no matter how this period panned out, I would always remain a committed supporter of the club and look forward to being a Rangers ambassador. So obviously he's now accepted that he has zero chance of ever being manager. Reality bites. I wish whomever becomes a new manager every success in the job, no doubt through gritted teeth. But going back to that comment from Elmer Fudd at the end of his statement, he said the search for our new head coach is progressing well and we look forward to concluding the process in the coming period. So what is the truth behind this? Now obviously the takeover has not yet concluded, so you would obviously hope that the parties that are taking over the club, which Dave King told us is 90% done and should be done by the start of June, are having a part to play in this, are having a say in this, because I certainly hope that the present board are having no say in this, because the track record of the present board in terms of appointing and keeping hold of decent managers is not very, very good indeed. I mean, we've only got to look at the fact that Steven Gerrard walked because he was not backed fully by Douglas Park and his son. You can all talk about Gerrard being a rat for walking away, but realistically, if you're offered a top 6 English Premier League club and you're offered probably twice your wages, you're probably going to take it. I'd ask you this question: if you're someone who's sitting there slagging Gerrard off tonight, or slagging off what I'm saying about Gerrard, I ask you this question: if a rival company to your company came in tomorrow and said, "Come and join us, you can have twice your wages," you would not turn them down. So there we go. I think that's football. People who talk about loyalty in football, I think it doesn't exist anymore. It genuinely doesn't. The days of the one club man, the days of supreme overarching loyalty to one club, they are dead and buried. The days of the John Greggs of this world are gone. They're never going to happen again. You're not going to get players who will remain with one club for their entire careers if they're a top player. So the hunt for the new manager goes on. Obviously, everyone got very excited about Davide Ancelotti as a potential candidate for the manager. He apparently is still, to some degree, in the running, but not thought to be as favoured as much. Now, what the truth of this whole situation is, I don't think anyone honestly knows. You can listen to all the speculation on other podcasts. You can listen to all the speculation in the media. You can listen to all the speculation amongst fans in live chats. But the truth is, none of us actually genuinely know the truth on this one. Yes, what we do know is that Davide Ancelotti will stay with his father for the time being, but for the Brazil job. But whether or not that is a long-term thing, none of us actually know whether that's the case. So he still could be tempted by the Rangers manager's job. However, looking on Sky Bet tonight, other betting firms are, of course, available. It's not just Sky Bet. Steven Gerrard is now the odds-on favourite to get the Rangers job, listed at 1-1 with Sky. Davide Ancelotti is second favourite at 2-1. I think Marco Rosa is third favourite. Certainly reading a number of articles tonight about the managerial candidates now, obviously, that Barry Ferguson has stepped down. The names have kind of tightened. Steven Gerrard, like I said, is the favourite. Steven Gerrard, during his time at Rangers, won 122 of his games, drew 42, lost 25, averaged 2.11 goals per game. But in terms of the candidates for the job, like I said, Steven Gerrard is apparently absolute odds-on favourite for this job at this moment in time. Other possible candidates that have also been talked about, has been on the shortlist, are Russell Martin, the former Southampton manager. Tottenham assistant manager Ryan Mason is also apparently on the shortlist, and former Luton boss Rob Edwards is also on the shortlist. I would certainly hope that genuinely that Ryan Mason and Rob Edwards are nowhere near this job at all. I mean, talk about genuinely dreadful managers. You've got two prime examples. Yes, Rob Edwards did lead Luton to the playoffs and to the Premier League, which is a phenomenal achievement with a club as tiny as Luton. But he played the most boring, negative long ball football that made Sean Dyche look like Pep Guardiola. So, if you're someone who doesn't want Sean Dyche because he plays boring, negative football, you ain't seen nothing to long ball Rob. So I don't think that, I personally hope that one is certainly not a goer. Ryan Mason has never had any real leadership management experience. Certainly doesn't have the CV that Davide Ancelotti has, in terms of the manager he's worked with. He's obviously worked with Carlo Ancelotti, one of the greatest managers in world football, whereas Ryan Mason's worked with some of the worst managers in world football, hence why Tottenham haven't won a trophy in God knows how long. Although I do, as much as I don't like Ange Postecoglou, I do hope they do win the Europa League, because I hate Manchester United even more. So look, I think, that's possible. So, in terms of that next manager, I think, like I said, lots of people are talking about Gerrard being the next manager, being the man. Um, you know, I don't know how true this is. I genuinely don't. I think that now, perceivably, Ancelotti is out of the market, or perceivably out of the market, which I don't 100% think he is at this time. It seems like Gerrard has moved back up in the odds because he's ex-Rangers manager. He's won the league. He has some understanding of the club. Now, there were those stories that came out saying that the next manager will have no previous links to Rangers. That again was only a report, a rumour. It was never 100% certain. You look at the people reporting that, they're not 100% reliable. So, as it is with any of these, I think, whatever we all think about who the next manager is, was, could be, should be, etc., whatever we read in the papers in terms of it's going to be Marco Rose, it's going to be Gerhard Struber, it's going to be Sean Dyche because, Kevin Thelwell worked with him, it's going to be Ryan Mason, it's going to be Rob Edwards, it's going to be this man, that man. It's going to be this person because he's linked with Red Bull, and Red Bull now have, it's all media speculation. And why do the media do this? Well, the same way there's reason that anyone who writes for websites, who makes content, does things to get clicks, because that's what we do. That's how we get people to watch. Ashamedly so to say it. But look, giving opinions, that's what we're here for at the end of the day. Look, I'm not professing to be any sort of expert on this. And people say, well, you criticise this person, you criticise that person. Who do you want? Well, or who would you play and all this? Well, with the greatest will in the world, it's not my job to decide that. I have not got a amazing scouting network. I have not got time to sit down and watch hundreds of hours of tape footage. I have not got the scouting network worldwide. I do not get to speak to these people one-to-one to form a qualified opinion. I, like any fan, I give my opinion based on what I see from watching football, and that's what I do, and that's what we all do. At the end of the day, none of us know better than the scouts and the technical directors and the sporting directors. And like I said, I have a full-time job. I work 50 hours a week. I haven't got time. I've got 2 daughters. I've got massive things on my mind at the moment. So, look, I can give my opinions. Steven Gerrard, I've got no objections to Steven Gerrard coming back as manager at all. Steven did a fantastic job when he was here last, because he turned the club round. He got the club moving in the right direction. It's a very similar situation to when he took over, really. He's got a massive, massive rebuild to do. He got the club to have an identity. He got the club playing to a style. He got the club in a position where people actually feared the club again, where the people actually worried about playing Rangers, were concerned about playing Rangers. Certainly Philippe Clement's and Barry Ferguson's Rangers were never feared. They're not feared at all by anyone. People like coming to Ibrox now. I can guarantee you when Steven Gerrard was manager, people didn't like coming to Ibrox because they knew they were going to get a battle. Gerrard was obviously very good at getting the players fit and ready to go as well. So look, no objections on him. Davide Ancelotti obviously is the wild card. I think he would be a very good appointment due to his experience, due to who he's worked with, due to what he's learnt from probably the best manager in world football right now. Pep Guardiola, yes, is a very good manager. Jurgen Klopp is a very good manager. Arne Slot obviously is a very good manager. But Hansi Flick is a very good manager, but none of them compared to Carlo Ancelotti and his achievements. So there we go. On that one, Marco Rose, for me, is one who plays a very good style of football, gegenpress, has had success in terms of wins and things with Dortmund. Yes, didn't have the best of times with Leipzig, and for the first time in, I think, 6 years, Leipzig haven't qualified for European competition, which is a major shock for them. Russell Martin, as a manager, well, he was very successful in getting Southampton promoted, playing a very good, attractive, attacking brand of football, which didn't work in the Premier League, and his big weakness was there was no plan B. Now, that will be a major concern to anyone associated with Rangers, that there is no plan B, because one of the big things we've criticised managers for in the past, Michael Beale, Philippe Clement, Barry Ferguson, that there's no plan B. If plan B is do plan A better, which doesn't really work, and Russell Martin seemed to have plan B was to do plan A better, just with different players. So, look, I don't think that I like his style of football, don't get me wrong. I like the guy, I like how he talks about the game, but I don't think he'd be suitable for Rangers. Rob Edwards, I think, would be a disaster. Ryan Mason, I think, would be a disaster. Sean Dyche would be just an absolute disaster. Derek McInnes, I think, will be the next Hearts manager, so I think he's ruled out of this one. Personally, I have no objections to Derek McInnes. I honestly think if you'd given Derek McInnes this team for the last 11 games, 12 games, whatever it was Ferguson ended up having in the end, he'd have got more out of them than Barry Ferguson. I think he would have had a better results record than Barry Ferguson. I genuinely do. He's a better coach. So, look, I mean, that's my opinions. Kevin Muscat, I think, would be a very good appointment as well. He plays a good attacking brand of football. Perhaps not as successful in Europe, but, domestically, I think we do well. So, you've got to look at it that way. Gerrard, that's obviously one of his positives, that he would get us doing well he'd do well in Europe. Gerrard has obviously got some failures on his CV since he left Rangers. The Villa being the big one. The fact that Unai Emery took that team, improved it a little bit and got them up to the Champions League, I think obviously is a massive one. But look, at the end of the day, Gerrard was successful in Scotland, and you can only go off what he did last time he was here. As much as he might have failed in England, which is a completely different league than Scotland, as much as you can put in, whatever he achieved in Saudi or didn't achieve in Saudi, again, it's very different to Scotland. So, you've got to kind of take all those failures with a little bit of a pinch of salt, as regards Steven Gerrard. And like I said, Steven Gerrard did win the league, undefeated. I mean, that's obviously a massive, massive thing. But, look, like I said, a lot of people now backing Gerrard in and saying that Gerrard has got the job. I mean, when that announcement comes, who knows? But, it's positive, I suppose, that that announcement is now close. And I think Rangers, as much as we might slaughter them for their absolutely dreadful PR, which they are pretty poor at, I've got to say they have got this one right, because at the end of the day, I think naming a manager for next season at a time when you've got a manager, even an interim manager, would effectively undermine him, and you don't want to do that. So for me, they've done the right thing on this one. And like I said, I do think an announcement is probably going to happen sooner rather than later. But like I said, I can only guess as to who that person's going to be. Maybe Gerrard is the favourite. Maybe Gerrard will get it now that Davide Ancelotti seems to have moved back a little bit in the kind of runners and riders, and Marco Rosa seems to have disappeared from all view on this one. That's where we're up to, guys. That's where we're up to with this whole manager hunt. And look, whoever comes in, it's a big job. It's a very, very big job. There is a number of players who need to be replaced. There's a number of players who need to be moved on this summer. I suppose the thing we've got to kind of consider is that, will the club make the right decisions? Do we look at this in terms of, have we truly got a trading model, or are there certain players that are unsaleable? And that's the question. I think that, personally speaking, you look through that squad, obviously Tom Lawrence will leave at the end of the season. It looks like Yanis Hadji will now leave at the end of the season. It looks like Ridvan Yilmaz will leave at the end of the season. Balogun, does he get a new deal? That's a big question that needs to be solved by Thelwell, Coppen, or whoever's organising contracts. There's players that need to be shipped out. I think you look at some of the players out there, and you just think, well, obviously not up to it. Robin Propper, I think, needs selling back to the Eredivisie. James Tavernier must be moved on. If James Tavernier is still here next season, it will be a disaster for this club. Cyril Dessers needs moving on. If he is still here next season, it will be a disaster for this club. You look at, they're the obvious names that jump out off the page. Like I said, Lawrence is leaving anyway. For those, and there's a lot of people who don't rate Tom Lawrence. James Tavernier, obviously, I think Tavernier is a big one for me. He's got to go. If he's still captain next season and he's still here next season, the club's in trouble. It really is. You've got to, I think, take out whatever leadership group there is now and replace it. Butland, I think, needs to probably be sold back down south and a new keeper brought in. Liam Kelly's not the answer. There's a lot of decisions to make for Steven Gerrard. My big concern, obviously, is if Gerrard comes in as manager, that he seems to love Tav, which would mean that Tav is more likely to stay. I'm still going to hold by this fact that James Tavernier does need to be got rid of ASAP, but I still going to hold by this assertion that I've made a number of times this season, is that he will still be cursing us with his presence next season, and he will still be captain next season, and he's going to get a new 2-year deal. That's my worry. And I think that would be a massive mistake. I think it'd be one of the biggest mistakes in this club's history, giving that man another contract. It really genuinely would. So look, that's where we're up to with this. There's so much to do. There's so much to do, guys. It's massive, and I think we've got to kind of get into some perspective, the absolute stature of the absolute weight of this job that is going to come onto somebody out there to be involved in. And whilst obviously we've got to realise that he will not buy and sell all the players, he will have a say in it certainly, but he will not be the one deciding who goes and who stays. It will be Thelwell and Coppen that will be making those decisions. So look, guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. Who stays, who goes. I think there's a lot of players that need to stay and go. I think for me, you look at that squad. You look at the players in that squad. Who stays, who goes. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I would get rid of the vast majority of them, but you've got to remember that you are not realistically going to get rid of every single player in one window. It just does not happen like that ever. One, because it's just impractical, and two, because you can't buy that number of players back in. I mean, looking down the list at the moment, in an ideal world, Butland goes this summer, Tavernier goes this summer, Yilmaz. I wouldn't personally sell Yilmaz, but he seems to want to go back to Turkey, so fair enough. Proper goes this summer. Suter stays. Cortez was stuck with. Barron stays. Dessers must go. He's got to go, Dessers. I just can't watch Rangers when he plays. Diamonde will stay. Lawrence goes. Bayrami has got to go. He's just a passenger. Cifuentes hopefully goes. Matondo goes. And Ciala, he's got to be given more time to mature. I think he'll get there eventually. Dowell, I think, will be sold to Birmingham City. That's certainly what I'm hearing down here. Dujon stays. Hiefte will stay. Ben Davis will be sold to Birmingham. Leon Balogun, I would give another year to. Hamza must stay. Hamza's top player. Yanis Hadji, I would love to keep Yanis Hadji. I don't think it'll happen. Liam Kelly, I'd sell him. Leon King, I'd sell him. Raskin has got to stay. Devine, I would sell. McCausland, I would sell. McKinnon, I'd keep. Bailey Rice, I'd keep. Finley Curtis, I'd keep. Mason Munn, I'd keep. Paul Uncio, I'd keep. And Danilo, I'd keep. I think Danilo gets a lot of unfair criticism from our fan base, given the fact that he has not had enough games. One, because he hasn't been fit, and most of those injuries, if you actually look at them, weren't his fault. They're not muscle injuries, they're impact injuries. The ACL injury, the face injury, there's someone else doing that to him. That's not his fault. And I think, he hasn't had a fair crack at the whip in the last few games because Barry Bassett insisted on playing Dessers. So look, I think, realistically, I mean, if Ajax Athens are in for Dessers, get him sold, get him gone. I'll drive him there myself. But look, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of change upcoming over this summer. A massive, massive amount of change upcoming over this summer for Rangers, and a lot of decisions to make. And it's down to Greta Steinson, it looks like. It's down to Kevin Thelwell, down to Niels Koppen to make those correct decisions. They've got to make those correct decisions for me. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Who would you keep? Who would you stay? Keep at the squad. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. As always, on the way out, if you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Guys, you must always remember, we are the people.